The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour, we'll be exploring living from the heart. You're not hearing me, my teacher softly accused. Yes, I am. I'm sitting right here and listening to every word you say, I defended. You're listening with your mind and your history, not your heart, he countered. I've come to realize that what he said was ever so true. We rarely hear each other, even when we're trying to listen. Instead, words of others go into our mind and are bounced around the triggers of our past wounding like a pinball machine. Ancient emotions from former hurts fill our hearts, and communication is not possible. Instead of taking in, we're projecting outwards, superimposing the past onto our present and making a rerun out of our future relationships. I truly believe this is the root of war and violence. There simply is no communication. Just projection of our wounding onto others and attacking them for wearing it. Yet we're all so deeply programmed through damage that it's almost impossible to hear through it. Is there no way out of these illusions that separate us, pitting us against each other? Actually, there's quite a bit we can do to clear our channels of communication. For one, know thyself. The first step to open communication is in knowing ourselves, our triggers, and our wounding. This may sound harsh, but in fact, we've all been programmed in one way or another out of our natural expression. True communication can only take place from authenticity. Ultimately, the more we heal these damaged places, the better. But if we wait until we're completely healed to open up lines of communication, we're going to be waiting a long time. One really good way to tell if you're coming from triggered damage is to take note. Are the emotions coming up out of proportion to the situation at hand? When I'm listening to someone, I listen with my heart and to my heart. I trust the person is of good intent, and it's my job to hear clearly. I look at feelings that come up in me as a result of their words to carefully discern if the emotions are from the moment or from my history. I feel the emotions come up. To be clear and present, I continue to listen until the speaker is done and then ask for clarification. There are times that the speaker will be projecting blame my way, but I keep in mind that it's not to do with me, but coming from their history. I stay neutral and I don't take it personally. I compartmentalize my own feelings around the encounter to process later, without projecting them back on the speaker. Mindfulness is also necessary. Our words have power. Carefully choosing one's words and using them kindly is of paramount importance. Taking responsibility for our own feelings and not using words of projection or blame is also essential for clear communication. Likewise, being frugal with our words is a far better way of being heard. Then we have sacred space. Using ceremony is a powerful way to set aside our wounding and judgment in order to be available to new input. Most every indigenous society had a protocol for holding council that facilitated clear communication. I use many of these ceremonies to set space and intent when I teach or during my interviews. I find the results to be hugely different than if I do not. Sacred space, forgiveness of self and others, self-mastery, listening with the heart, neutrality, and careful languaging are the keys to hearing and being heard. Our guest this hour is Stephen V. Beyer. His latest book, Talking Stick, Peacemaking as a Spiritual Path, is filled with good information to facilitate peaceful and accurate communication. Steve is a well-known writer and speaker on shamanism and spirituality. He's also a community builder, peacemaker, and carrier of counsel. He's been trained and certified in many areas of circle process, meditation, and nonviolence, and he has often offered peacemaking workshops to a wide variety of audiences. Steve has a law degree and 2 PhD degrees, one in Buddhist studies and one in psychology. I'll introduce Steve and tap his vast knowledge after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Stephen V. BEYERS, PhD, JD, a well-known writer and speaker in shamanism and spirituality, and the author of Talking Stick, Peacemaking as a Spiritual Path. Stephen, welcome so much to The Science of Magic.
Well, thank you so much, Gwilda. I'm happy to be here. I want to thank you for that beautiful introduction. I really liked that. Your talk at the beginning was, I think, very profound, very moving. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for being here. I've really been excited about our time together and discussing your latest book, and it seems to be a little different than your previous ones that were about plants, I believe, plant medicine. So what inspired you to write this one?
In some ways, it comes from the same roots, which is my experiences in the wilderness and studying wilderness survival, and thinking about the ways in which indigenous peoples and others survive and even flourish in what to us is a wilderness and to them is home. And part of that is that it seems to me that most indigenous spiritual systems center on the need to be in right relationship with each other and with the plants and trees and rocks, the animals and all of the other spirits that fill their cosmos. And so I started looking, on the one hand, at the ways in which ceremonially and using the sacred plants, such as ayahuasca or peyote, they were able to maintain these relationships with the spiritual world, and the ways in which they were able to maintain right relationship with each other. And that led me toward thinking about the ways in which circle processes, council, circle, are a deeply human way of meeting together and making decisions and dealing with problems and trying to heal conflict and building a community. So I started taking some seminars and courses on counsel and on mediation and on spiritual guidance, and I developed my own thoughts and started giving these workshops and seminars all over the place to schools and churches and graduate students and wilderness therapists, and developed this set of ideas about how I think circle can best be used for those purposes, and how being in circle with other people, holding the talking stick, passing the talking stick, is a basic component of human spirituality, and is in itself
I love the
a
ceremony of the
spiritual
talking
path.
stick, and I use it often, particularly when I'm working with children, but adults need it as badly. Would you mind sharing with our listeners its origin and how it is used?
There are really three factors, I think, that make sitting in council special as a way of meeting together and making decisions and dealing with problems and trying to heal conflict. And that is, one, that you sit in a circle; two, that you begin and end with a ceremony; and three, that you hold and you pass a talking stick. It doesn't have to be a stick; it could be anything. I've used things I've picked up off the table, or a rock you pick up just on the spur of the moment. But it's often useful to have something special that you have smudged with sage or somehow made powerful. And the rule of the talking stick is simple. Whoever holds the stick gets to talk, and everybody else listens. There are no interruptions. There are no challenges. Everybody listens to the person who is holding the talking stick. And it's simple, but it's not easy, because as you have said, and as you know, we have been systematically trained in our culture not to listen to each other. So the talking stick is this tremendously powerful tool that you can use to guide people in the sacred space of circle toward their own hearts.
It's beautifully put, and I like I said, I just love the ceremony. It works so well, and it's a visual representation of the mindfulness that we need to have in order to listen. So often we're busy thinking about what we're going to say next and not present to listen to what the person is saying. And I think having that physical representation really helps focus that ability, don't you?
I think that's right. I think, and as you said, I have often heard it put that when we think we're listening to people, we're not really listening, we're reloading.
Yeah, I like that.
And it's true. The talking stick, I think, it empowers the shy. It guides those who would otherwise dominate the conversation. It gives everybody a voice. And just as sitting in circle creates a sacred space within which every voice carries the same weight as every other voice, and just as the ceremony creates a sacred time within which we can just sit with each other without an agenda, without a goal, without trying to direct and control the way the circle goes, the talking stick is a way in which that sacred space and time is used so that in this space of devout listening with the heart, people who hold the stick have the courage to speak honestly from their hearts. And people who have the courage of the stick, people who have the courage of the talking stick to speak honestly from their hearts, that honesty compels devout listening. And that's what happens in the sacred space of the circle. That's what happens in the sacred time of counsel.
Is really, really being met and heard and listening. It's a rare commodity. You know, one thing that I've noticed, Stephen, in my dealing with people is oftentimes that people think, well, if you're a good listener, that means you have to give up your truth and really take the other person's position. And that's kind of a cop-out to me. If we can't have debate and conflict, we can't bring everything to the table that we all have to offer. So would you speak to how to honor both?
I think once you start accepting that you only know what's in your heart, you don't know what's in somebody else's heart until that person tells you. And the only way you can find out what is in that person's heart is to listen devoutly with your own heart. If somebody is speaking from his or her heart, the only organ that we have that can hear that heart speak is our heart. Not our intellectual reasoning, not our moral judgment, not our argumentative nature, but our heart. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I think this was very true. You open your heart, and it's kind of like a Zen meditation. It's kind of like no mind. Rather than trying to keep in mind what the other person says so that you can rebut it later, you open your heart, you open your body. Your body opens like a flower to take in what the other person is saying. And because you are listening devoutly, you're not preparing what you're going to say. You allow the circle you allow the process to dictate what you say, not your own ego. And you trust the process that what needs to be said in that circle at that very moment will be said, if not you, by somebody. It's a matter of letting go of ego. It's a matter of letting go of hierarchy. It's a matter of letting go of everything except the process of sitting in circle with other human beings. And that touches something that I think is deeply, deeply human in us.
I would agree.
And
it's like when you're listening with your heart, you can hear information that you wouldn't otherwise hear and contemplate it versus immediately reject it and polarize against it. It doesn't mean you have to take it on as your truth, but at least you know where that other person is coming from and what their experience is. Is that what you're talking about?
I think that's absolutely right. I agree with that completely. The idea is that there is a wisdom to the circle that is way beyond, 1,000 times greater than the wisdom of any one person in that circle. And you can call it what you want. You can call it collective wisdom. You can call it the spirits. You can call it spirit. But whatever is happening, whoever is speaking, you are listening for the voice of spirit. You are listening for the voice of wisdom, which can come from the most unexpected places, even from you, which is why it's so important
it is amazing to
get out of the way.
When you're in circle, what I've found, Stephen, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's like all of a sudden you're one organism. And you don't have to say it all because, like you say, somebody else will say it maybe even better than you would have if it's not yours to say at the time. And in human communication, conflicts do seem to be somewhat unavoidable. So when you're sitting in circle, what tools do you use for conflict resolution when people start to slide out of their hearts when you're guiding the circle?
First of all, let me comment on the term conflict resolution or conflict management. I don't like those terms. I don't like them because they assume that conflict is bad, and therefore it's something that needs to be managed. It needs to be resolved. It needs to be put away. And I think a better view is that conflict is inevitable and conflict is good, because conflict is always your best opportunity to deepen human relationships.
I totally agree with that. Because if we try to just find agreement and we don't find where we disagree, we don't deepen our relationships. We're just kind of milk toasting away, aren't we?
That's right. And I think in our culture, we tend to be very transactional. We tend to think that negotiation and compromise are in fact ways in which conflict is best resolved, managed, put away, hidden away. But an exercise I do in my some of my workshops.
Stephen, can I have you hold that exercise? Because we're going to have to take a quick break, and I'd love to hear it. So I want to give you enough time for it. We will return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. You want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Stephen V. Beyer, Ph.D., J.D., a well-known writer and speaker on shamanism and spirituality, and the author of Talking Stick, Peacemaking as a Spiritual Path. His website, www.singingtotheplants.com. Stephen, welcome back, and you were just about to share with us a procedure that you use.
Well, I've got two. I've got a short one and a longer one. Let me try the short one because I don't want to run over time, but this is a very simple exercise. You and a friend have an orange, and you have to share the orange. It's no good to cut the orange in half, and each of you gets half the orange, because then you're not getting an orange, you're getting half an orange. You have to come up with a way where you both get the whole orange. That's the task. And when I've given that in my workshops and seminars, people come up with wonderful ideas. They come up with the idea that they stud the orange with clothes and hang it in the kitchen so that it smells good. They get the idea of taking the seeds from the orange and planting them so that they have orange trees. They have the idea that they'll take the orange skin and grate it and make orange muffins with it. In other words, people are able to come up with ideas when there is a conflict that doesn't involve each person getting less than a whole solution. And that whole solution is always a deepening relationship between the two people. Always what happens is that when people work together in order to meet a mutually unmet need, like the need to share this orange, then their relationship deepens. It has nothing to do with conflict management. It has nothing to do with compromise. It has nothing to do with getting half an orange rather than a whole orange. It comes up with ways in which people work together to meet mutually unmet needs. I have another exercise if you're interested.
I am.
All right. I have a workshop, and I split people up into groups of two. And I say the first person in each group, they say that they are people who work together, and they're looking for a nice evening together after a really hard work week. One of them wants to go out and get Mexican food. Has been thinking about Mexican food and really wants Mexican food. The second one, I say, doesn't want Mexican food, had Mexican food last week, wants Thai food. Now, if we look at this in the ordinary way, here's a conflict. Here's fighting, war, anger, dispute. And I say, you have 2 minutes to resolve this conflict. And they do. They come up with wonderful ideas. They say, all right, we decided what we would do is we go to a food court so each of us could get the kind of food the other one wanted, get the kind of food that he or she wanted. They say, oh, we decided that we'd go to a Mexican restaurant for margaritas and appetizers, and then we'd go to a Thai restaurant. They say, we decided we'd try a kind of food neither of us had tried before, like Ethiopian food. One pair came up with the idea of cooking at home and trying to make enchiladas with peanut sauce.
I love that solution.
And the lesson from this,
Stephen, I've noticed there's a lot of modern day languaging tools that's used in corporate institutions on how to be socially correct, and yet I find that the person is saying one thing with their words, but another with their energy. Can you speak to this and how we can come into agreement with our energy as well as our speaking?
Well, I think, again, the very human, deeply human nature of the circle and the power of the talking stick and the being in the presence of devout listening allows the speaker access to his or her own heart in a way that might not have been possible before. When I was being trained in active resistance, active nonviolence by the Fellowship of Reconciliation, we were told that if we were going into a situation that was potentially confrontational, the first thing we needed to do was to disarm ourselves. And it's that way when you're sitting in circle with people who are listening devoutly and you're holding the courage-giving power of that talking stick, you can dig down deep into your heart in a way that you might not before. I have seen this happen. Somebody will take the stick when it's passed and will hold it for a minute, hesitating, searching, wondering whether to pass the stick and say nothing, and suddenly the person's heart opens up. It's miraculous to see, and the person is speaking his or her truth with humility, and it just comes out, and it is wonderful. And I think that, again, is the power of the circle. That's the power of the talking stick. It is the power of spirit speaking through that person and having that person speak that person's truth with humility at that moment.
It's the power of ceremony, too, isn't it? Because you've created a space in which this can happen, and we can operate as an organism. So what's the proper role for the mind in heart-centered communication, Stephen?
Well, that's a good question. For somebody who spent so many years living in his head and took that really, really long journey from head to heart, I think that's a wonderful question. I think there is. I think that. Well, I'm struggling here because that's a damn good question. Am I allowed to say that word?
I think so.
I think the mind has a very small role to play. I think that the mind tends to obstruct this communication rather than to facilitate it. Now, it comes into play later. Sometimes after a moving, open-hearted circle, you walk away and you say, what just happened there? That was amazing. Or you come back down, and after people have spoken their truths, and you need, for example, to find a way forward, you need a practical way to implement what decisions were made, or people have come to an agreement about how they're going to heal a conflict, then the mind can come into play with the practical things that you need to do. But I think for most of us who in our culture, we live in our heads so much, I think that's something that needs to be overcome. And in the circle itself, I think that the constant chatter in our heads of criticism of what other people are saying, the constant chatter of thinking about what we're going to say, the constant worry that we're going to have nothing to say, the constant fear of judgment if people don't like what we're going to say, all of that has to be swept aside so that your heart can just open up and Spirit can speak through you.
That's beautifully put, Stephen. You're a carrier of counsel. From what tradition or traditions, and would you mind explaining what that means?
Well, it's a term that's used rather loosely. I've been trained in counsel processes by the Ojai Foundation. I've been trained, I don't have the list in front of me, but I've taken a lot of trainings in various kinds of circles, as well as in mediation and other kinds of conflict resolution, as it's usually put. But this is basically something that I developed on my own. It's the result of years of holding circle and sitting in council with hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people by now, and bringing to it, I think what is a little bit different about my approach is twofold. I think if you read a lot of books on circle or counsel or on conflict resolution or on restorative justice, they tend to be very practical. And I don't think they, for the most part, spend enough time thinking about the sacredness of what happens in a circle, the spiritual nature of what happens in a circle, even under the most adverse of conditions, say people who have been in bloody inter-ethnic conflict for generations. There is something deeply spiritual that happens there because you are in sacred space.
I really want to pick up on
time.
the sacredness of the circle, but we're going to have to take another short break, Stephen. We'll be back on the flip side of this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to our world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Stephen V. Byeyer, Ph.D., J.D., a well-known writer and speaker on shamanism and spirituality, and the author of Talking Stick, Peacemaking as a Spiritual Path. His website, www.singingtotheplants.com. Stephen, you were just speaking about the sacredness of the circle and how it facilitates true communication. Before I so rudely interrupted you with a break.
I think I sort of finished what I was going to say.
Okay.
I think if there is a message I want to give to your listeners, it is try it. Get a talking stick, pass it around, sit in circle, open with a ceremony, sit in sacred time, and just speak honestly to each other. You can have what's called a talking circle, which has no purpose other than people speaking what's in their hearts at that moment. And give it a try. I have seen the most amazing things happen when I give say a weekend or a 3 or 4 day workshop or seminar. People go home and try this out with their families, and they come back amazed. They say, I haven't been able to talk to my teenage daughter in a year, and just by handing her an invisible talking stick and listening to her devoutly with my heart, and then holding my invisible talking stick and opening my heart to her has suddenly changed the whole dynamic of our relationship. So hand your invisible talking stick to people, to your spouse or partner, or to your children, to your parents, to your taxi driver, to the checkout person at the supermarket. Hand your talking invisible stick to everyone you meet. Hand your talking stick to a tree. Hand your talking stick to the stars. Hand your talking stick to spirit. And listen devoutly for what they have to say. And I think that's the second thing that I think is a little bit different about Talking Stick, my book, is that at the end I make it explicitly shamanic. That I see this idea of the talking stick as a way of getting into relationship, not only with your friends and your family and your coworkers and your community, but as a way of getting into relationship, into right relationship with nature and with the spirits of nature.
That's a beautiful point, Stephen, because we so often think that listening is just listening to each other. But the art of listening and listening with an open heart can be and needs to be applied to everything on the planet for us to reconnect with the way truth works. Would you mind telling our listeners where they can find your books?
It is going to be published by Beyer and Company, B-E-A-R, Beyer and Company. That's affiliated with Inner Traditions. It's going to be coming out in the middle of July this summer, and you can either go to the Inner Traditions website, or it's right there on Amazon.com. Look up, Beyer Talking Stick, and it's there. There is a brief excerpt from the book if people are curious. I've also just started a Facebook group, Talking Stick, where the idea is to have discussions about circle processes, about counsel, about peacemaking, about mediation, about how we can bring peace to our families and workplaces and communities and courts and schools, and start, please join in and start a discussion or participate in a discussion. But if you want to get the book, which I encourage you to do, go to Amazon.com and look it up, and it should be available the middle of the summer.
Well, great. Well, speaking of which, I have a tough one for you. Here's a deep subject, and we only have a little bit left, but I'm going to let you dive in. What do you think it's going to take to bring peace to our world, Stephen?
I say this in the book, and nobody has persuaded me otherwise, which is this. I distrust large institutions. I distrust big governments. I distrust big NGOs. I distrust big anything. I think that the way we do this is we plant small seeds of peace. I believe that each of us plants a small seed of peace. We start a circle in our school. We start council at a workplace. We sit down in circle with our neighbors, maybe once a week. We plant these seeds of peace. We carry the idea of being a peacemaker is to walk through your life holding a talking stick and handing that stick to everyone, and slowly making these circles of peace expand. And what is miraculous to me is that as you become a peacemaker, as you walk through life holding your talking stick, things change. You lose fear, because what do we fear? We fear our loss of dignity. We fear our loss of ego. We fear our dominance, losing our dominance, our hierarchy, our ability to oppress other people. If we give those all away, nobody can take them away anymore. We can walk cheerfully through the world. We can walk in beauty every day holding this talking stick. And everyone we hand that invisible talking stick to, everyone who comes with us and sits in a physical circle with us in sacred time and sacred space, carries away a little bit of that peace. And slowly these circles expand.
So basically you're saying live every moment and every day coming from your heart rather than your mind and your ego?
I think I as somebody who has lived in his head for a long time, I wouldn't recommend abandoning our minds, our heads, but I think we need to have a certain balance in our lives. I think that it's between the heart and the head, there has to be, I think, a dynamic balance. We have to understand things, we have to feel things, and we have to relate to other people on every possible level. And so I think that it's a matter of an appropriate balance.
You know, it really is. And being able to be mindful in all our communications, but also we have to figure ourselves into that equation. If we find ourselves being open-hearted in a situation where it just isn't being responded to, I think there's times when discerning proximity is equally important so that we can live our life with an open heart without being damaged. Do you agree with this?
I think what damages us? And think about that. What is it that damages us? What are we afraid of? What are we afraid of losing? I don't know if we have time for a story, but
we're just close. We got about 1 minute.
All right. What we fear losing are things that our culture tells us are important. We fear losing our dignity. We fear having our ego bruised. We fear losing our position in a moral hierarchy. We fear censure and blame. But if we are walking through life with a talking stick, we've given those all up. We've given up the concept of hierarchy. We've given up the hierarchy that human relationships are transactional rather than transformational. We've given up the idea of punishing other people or other people punishing us. And if we've given those all up, what can anybody do to us?
You know, that's a beautiful point.
What can they take away?
Time has flown, and I'm afraid we're out of it. Stephen, thanks again for joining us on The Science of Magic. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, and live in peace.
Searching through the night, one people, one nation, searching for the light. One people, one nation.